Bulova is a curious case among collectors. On one side, the brand has over 150 years of existence behind its name, contributing to the rise of an American business giant and delivering some impactful designs that shaped the 20th century. However, there were many years when the brand strayed from its horological zenith of the mid-20th century, becoming a story of two contrasting concepts, one with unquestionable historical importance and the other commercially driven, characterized by marketable products suitable for the masses. With this, a common question arises when looking at the brand. Are Bulova watches any good? Now today we're going to go deeper into the story of Bulova, taking a closer look at their modern collection as a way to address this question more directly. Now, what can't be disputed about Bulova is that they are a household name here in the United States. All started by Joseph Bulova, a Bohemian immigrant who established the J. Bulova Company in 1875 on Maiden Lane in New York's financial district, beginning as a small shop dealing in jewelry as well as clock and pocket watch repair. By 1911, he was producing his own clocks and pocket watches and began producing at scale at his facility in Biel, Switzerland. Incorporated in 1923 as the Bulova Watch Company, they became well known for their Art Deco influenced watch designs during that period, with handsome models that included the Breton, the Commodore, and the Lone Eagle appearing in early advertisements. Bulova's ascension came by way of its watches first, along with an uncanny ability for brand building. Bulova was something of an advertising pioneer, going so far as establishing an observatory on top of 585th Avenue with the purpose of determining universal time more accurately. The Bulova Observatory featured prominently in their marketing, and the company boasted that their watches were cased and timed at the observatory. Bulova can also claim the very first national radio advertisement in 1926, and the company only grew from there. It shifted its primary US operations to Queens, where it continued to innovate in the realm of tooling and mass production techniques. Bulova were also the very first company to advertise on television, with a 10-second commercial airing before a Brooklyn Dodgers baseball game on July 1st, 1941. The early 1940s marked another crucial moment in the brand's history, supplying watches to the Allied forces during World War II. And in 1945, Chairman Artie Bulova founded the Joseph Bulova School of Watchmaking to train disabled veterans, which lives on through the Veterans Watchmaking Initiative, a nonprofit institution that teaches disabled veterans watchmaking to this day. By the 1960s, Bulova was one of the world's largest watchmaking companies, becoming an integral part of the United States' cultural fabric. There are some reports that speculate that Bulova was around 15% of the global luxury watch market around the 1960s at their peak, eclipsing over $100 million in revenue, which would equate to $1 billion company today. Just for some context, Rolex is the only brand in the Swiss watch industry that claims more than 15% market share. The brand even went so far to acquire Universal Genève in 1967, and then you pair that with the Accutron tuning fork technology, this brand was a force to be reckoned with in the 1960s. Some of Bulova's best known models launched in this mid-20th century period. This includes the previously mentioned Accutron, the Oceanographer dive watch, and the Chronograph C. Bulova also began selling quartz models along with much of the rest of the watch industry, and made waves with their digital LED Computron in 1976, which did the lion's share of keeping the company viable during the period. In 1979, Bulova was acquired by the Lowe's Company, a conglomerate with holdings in hotels, energy, tobacco, and a chain of movie theaters. Then in 2007, Bulova was purchased by Japanese Citizen Group, which has now made it a priority to revive several historical model lines alongside their more mass market offerings. And to give more evidence to how rich the history is for Bulova, there's a whole film dedicated to the brand known as American Telling Time, 150 Years of Bulova, that was released in honor of their anniversary. And it's a great in-depth look of their significance within America's watchmaking. So if you want to check that out, I'd recommend actually giving it a watch. And another aspect of Bulova's history that's worth mentioning is their connection to space. I'm not gonna get into that a crazy amount here, but I'd recommend checking out our full piece of content dedicated to Watches of Space. It's on our website, teddyballisher.com, for teddyballisher.com subscribers. This is an unbelievable piece. It's hosted by Robert Perlman. He is a NASA fanatic and historian and knows so much about the Apollo program, but also different aspects of the space exploration pursuits of the the 20th century and beyond. He goes through many of the different watches that have gone to space over the years. And I'm actually, as a way to present this, gonna roll the trailer for this piece of content if you wanna check it out.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But when you think of spaceflight equipment, you don't normally think of watches. The Mir watch may seem like a ubiquitous item that we all own or have owned in our life.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
One of their crew members take off his Omega Speedmaster and time it on his Speedmaster and how long they should fire the engine. In that sense, Omega's helped save Apollo 13. One of the big questions right now is that NASA's preparing to send astronauts back to the moon and what watch they might wear, if any.
That looks interesting to you? Definitely check it out. Link will be in the description down below. This is a new development for us here and is something I'm really focused on. I'm gonna continue to post videos here every single week. Nothing's gonna change about that. But as you can see, having different personalities and experts in their field talk about watchmaking, that's a huge goal, allows us to scale and talk about things that can exist outside of an algorithm. So this sounds cool. Would love your support. Check out the video down below. But now back to the subject at hand. So why do people ask if Bulova watches are any good? Well, the truth is, like many other large brands, Bulova produces a massive number of watches that, quite frankly, aren't geared towards us as enthusiasts. Despite their historical significance and long record of innovation, a large segment of Bulova's offerings is made up of inexpensive mass market pieces that appeal to non-watch enthusiasts who are just browsing for a watch in a department store. Now, there's nothing wrong with this. I don't want to belittle this idea. After all, companies need to sell products in order to stay in business, and Bulova does this very well with watches that are designed for non-watch people. But for every lunar pilot or Jetstar, there are many more watches with conservative designs, with basic quartz movements, and some that may feature a bit of a bling compared to what watch collectors seek out. This all leads to what I discussed earlier about this brand being a brand of two stories, really, where some of the pieces from Bulova are exceptional for the dollar amount, while others get lost in the mix as being commercially viable yet generic, neglecting their strong history in the process. So with this being the case, I want to dedicate this next portion of the video to calling out the areas of Bulova where they are really at their best. This is not to say that things that are not included here are not worth buying. If you like it, you should absolutely go for it. These are just the no-brainer picks from Bulova and really allow the brand to shine, I think, within the contemporary collection. So a safe place to start within Bulova's vast model range is the Archive series collection. And yes, their catalog can get a bit confusing as some of these watches will show up in other categories as well. And the first of the list has to be the Lunar Pilot Chronograph. Although the Omega Speedmaster was the officially flight qualified watch of NASA during the Apollo program, Bulova played an important role in space exploration as they provided onboard instrument panel clocks and timekeeping mechanisms powered by their Accutron technology. But perhaps more remarkable is the story of the Apollo 15 commander David Scott, whose Speedmaster ejected its Hezolite crystal during the mission. Now, fortunately, Scott was actually provided a prototype from Bulova. It was a manually winding chronograph on board as backup, and it became the only privately owned watch ever worn on the lunar surface. It was auctioned in 2015, fetching a cool $1.5 million, leading to Bulova's reissue of the watch in the modern high-frequency quartz format, with it now being available at 2 different case sizes and has evolved to include different colorways such as the blue and white panda version, you have the red blood moon variant, and other limited edition pieces. The white on black version remains closest to the original tool worn on the lunar surface, with its white elements standing out well against the subtle black sheen of the dial finish, with a high accuracy quartz caliber topping it off. Which leads us to one area where Bulova has carved out another place for itself in a big way, and that is with its innovation in quartz technology. What I'm really getting at here, though, specifically is a movement known as the Precisionist. So this ultra accurate watch utilizes a 3-pronged quartz crystal that vibrates at an astonishing 262,144 times per second and is often quoted as being accurate up to 5 seconds per month. Now, the second hand is able to beat 16 times a second, creating that gliding sweep that puts automatic watches to shame. It's really cool to see in practice and almost matches that of the rotation of the glide wheel and how the Grand Seiko spring drive movements are going to appear to the naked eye. The movements appear in a range of Bulova's model families, but there are several enthusiast choices that utilize the tech, identified by the infinity symbol on the dial, including the reboot of the vintage TVK Super Seville, as well as the throwback Jetstar models. Now for these next few pieces, this is where we look back to the heyday of Bulova in the mid-20th century when they were really dominant in the watchmaking landscape with tributes that are authentic to the period. To start, we have two classics from the dive genre. The new Bulova Snorkel series features a hybrid ceramic case, not unlike the blockbuster Moonswatch, but these water-resistant dive-style models feel much more robust in their construction, available in 5 bold colorways named after sea creatures with probably more to come. They feature a ratcheting bezel, 100 meters of water resistance, screwed in stainless steel case back, and a tropic-style rubber strap. And all of this comes with a pretty approachable price point. Now this served as the brand's foray into the dive watch world in the early 1960s, evolving steadily from there. Now that evolution took a substantial leap with a piece known as the Oceanographer. The Bulova Oceanographer was famously water resistant to 666 feet, earning it the diabolical nickname, the Devil Diver. This watch was an extension off of the 60s Snorkel Skin Diver. It came with a polished tonneau case designed with a Doxa-like profile and initially was designed for use by the US military. Apart from its unforgettable name, it was accompanied by translucent dial markers held in by prong jewel settings. The modern Oceanographer uses Miyota automatic calibers, including the 4Hz Traveler GMT 9075. Shifting to the even quirkier, we have the Chrono C. Now this line is based off of a very collectible 1970 original with a large case with a lugless design. It's a dial nothing short of striking, having red, white, and blue as part of the colorway known as the Stars and Stripes. It utilizes Bulova's high performance quartz movement on the inside for fantastic accuracy and getting that smooth sweep. For this next brief mention, this is where we're going to highlight another in-the-know detail about Bulova, as they were among the first brands to introduce an attainable true GMT in the mechanical variety. This first started in 2022 with the release of a watch known as the Wilton. Strangely, this was the introduction of the Miyota 9075 in the United States. These are, I guess, the perks of being part of the Citizen Watch Group, and it still represents one of the points of entry for a true GMT in mechanical watchmaking, especially for a major brand, as it usually is only micros undercutting it with this movement. As a follow-up, this caliber was also featured in pieces such as the Oceanographer, a model family that seamlessly integrated the GMT concept into the core design formula. Now we transition to one of the most authentic aspects of Bulova's history, their development of military timepieces. Along with brands such as Waltham, Hamilton, and Elgin, Bulova was one of the largest producers of military timepieces for the US forces during World War II. In the 1940s, the US government issued a request for watches that could uphold the A11 spec, which required durability, legibility, and featured hacking seconds for the ability to synchronize on the battlefield. The A11 watches were utilized during D-Day and are commonly referred to as the watches that won the war, living on through the Bulova hack watches of today. Many people, when they talk about this genre of watch, they will speak of other brands before Bulova, but they have just as much claim to this category as any brand out there. From the dive watch side, Bulova released a vintage reissue of a prototype dive watch in 2021, which was initially created for the US military's Bureau of Ships, designed to meet the needs of Navy divers, including their explosive ordnance disposal and underwater demolition teams, the precursor to the Navy SEALs. Bulova eventually chose not to pursue the contract. However, the prototypes found their way back to Bulova, leading to this reissue, which has a couple of unusual safety features. It includes a push-to-turn bezel and a moisture indicator on the dial. Another example of Bulova's military history, a so-called elapsed time watch inspired by a 1944 prototype that never made it into production. It featured a triple crown design with 2 inner rotating discs controlled by the crowns at 2 and 4, and the crown at 3 setting the time. The crown at 2 operates the outer elapsed time minute disc, and the crown at 4 sets the inner 12-hour disc for tracking a second time zone. Given the original use case, these are authentically on the larger side of the scale, measuring at 42 millimeters in diameter and boasting a lug-to-lug length of 50 millimeters. To say Accutron was and is a big deal for Bulova is certainly an understatement. The Accutron watch was introduced in 1960, a revolution in accuracy with its space-age electronics replacing the centuries-old tradition of spring-powered movements. This pioneering electronic watch that hums was incredibly precise when compared to its spring-powered predecessors, advertised as 99.9977% accurate to within 2 seconds a day. Their Accutron SpaceView retail display models features an open dial showcasing the tuning fork in action and became so popular that the open dial version was offered for sale to the public. But alas, the Accutron wasn't really long for this world, as newer, cheaper, and equally accurate quartz movements were on the horizon. Production of the original tuning fork Accutron ceased in 1977 and the name was shuttered for decades. But the brand was officially relaunched as a separate entity in 2020, coinciding with the introduction of their electrostatic movement technology in the SpaceView. Now, some people might say it could be a stretch to go and include Accutron in a video about Bulova, but I think these brands are so inextricably linked that they have to be included together, and it's a part of Bulova's story. Further, if you go to Bulova's website, you can cross-link to Accutron very easily, which is something I could never imagine another brand doing. If you look at a larger conglomerate, imagine if you go to Rolex's site and you can see Tudor or vice versa. That's just not something that they strive to do. So there is obviously a link between these two brands that is certainly different. So to sum up Bulova, I think my closing thoughts about this brand is they are such an interesting mixed bag, because on one side you have this unbelievable history behind this name. It is one of the most storied names. If you go back to the mid-20th century in the 50s and 60s, they were in the same discourse alongside some of the leading Swiss names that we celebrate to this day. They have just since fallen out of favor. Part of this has happened as a byproduct of the quartz crisis and their fall from grace during that period. But there's been this shift from the brand. There was a time where they were making a lot of mall watches, for lack of a better term. But since, I think they've been able to find a good balance. They have to have that commercial product with things that might not be catered to enthusiasts. But what's increasingly becoming a part of their portfolio is some of these watches that I mentioned here. The Super Sevilles, the Lunar Pilots, the Jet Stars, many other Precisionist models. You can also look at their military timepieces, some of their cool, quirky watches that even came out, like their parking meter. There are so many watches now that you can mention from Bulova as being interesting takes, especially for enthusiasts. Now, just to use the lens of an enthusiast is not the right way to look at a brand when you're commercially talking about them. But if you are a collector asking, are Bulova watches worth it? I think you do have to ask these broader questions about, you think about the value that you want to obtain from a watch that you're looking to buy. And I think for Bulova, there are watches that might not align with what you're looking for if you really want to get into the world of mechanical watchmaking for the first time, or just want things with cool history and tie-in. But on the flip side, there's a lot of things from Bulova that are absolutely worth it. It's just not a universal yes as it might be for other brands out there, but that's usually not even the case for most brands anyway. So short answer is, are Bulova watches actually any good? Yes. And I think if you just focus on some of the areas that they really excel and are speaking more to their history and their authenticity as one of the leading watchmakers of the past 150 years, that's where they're really going to be able to showcase what they're capable of. And most of the time, it's being done with great value for money in the process. And Accutron adds another additional cherry to the formula that allows them to differentiate from so many others in their class. But all right, guys, that is my take here looking at the question of Bulova watches, a brand that certainly is confusing, a lot of different takes about this brand, but that's generally my take on how I look at Bulova. If this was helpful to you and you'd like us to do other videos like this, please give this one a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Really do appreciate that. That does help out the channel as well and allows us to keep doing what we're doing here. It lets the YouTube algorithm know that we're doing a good job. Also, if you want to see more of what is going behind the scenes of watches that extended beyond our atmosphere, definitely check out that video with Robert Perlman that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Really proud of that piece of content. We're gonna have additional content every single month like this coming out on teddyballister.com. We have a few other assets as well available for viewing, so a couple hours of content even at this point, and probably by the time that some people watch this in the future, it could be tens and dozens of hours of content. We really wanna make a comprehensive library, so stay tuned, become a member. We really appreciate it as well. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I'll see you all very soon.